Tony Peterson here for Top 5 Rock Lists, and today it's kind of a rainy day. It's more than kind of a rainy day. The last 2 hours I've been rained out of work most of the day today, so I'm doing a video in my car. I feel like the clarity of what I'm saying is probably a little bit better in the car, but it's kind of fun to do videos outside. So today I'm going to be going over my top 5 favorite female rockers. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Number 5 on my list is Grace Slick from the Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship. Not so much in the Starship era, you know, this We Built This. If you only know her as We Built This City type lady, you're missing out. You know, she was a real groundbreaking, she paved the way for a lot of ladies, especially ladies who wanted to be kind of like in a rock band with men. And you know, she was tough, and she could hold her own, you know, when people talked down to her sexually and any other way. You know, she could really hit them with some zingers. And you know, she was not only that, but you know, the talent was great. Jefferson Starship, one of these times I'm gonna have to do a video on my favorite jam bands, because Jefferson Starship, more than the Airplane even, is one of my favorite jam bands. And you know, she used her voice in a jam band type manner. You know, she would just kind of fill empty spaces with it in the songs, and her voice could be soaring. You know, it could just really go places. Usually between her and Paul Cantor, who she wound up having a baby with later, who's their daughter, I forget the daughter's name. It's kind of an interesting name, like Sunshine or Moon, I can't remember, something like that, August, or you know, one of those hippie type names, you know, from the 70s, from the late 60s, San Francisco area type deal. So anyway, you know, when with his kind of low voice and kind of monotone thing, and then she'd come up over the top of it, and Marty Balin did the same thing. You know, those three voices were just interweaving, and it was really great. Grace Slick, number 5 on my list. Number 4 on my list is not a person, it's a band. The Bangles. You know, in the mid 80s, the Bangles were kind of, to me, they were kind of a Beatle-esque band, regardless if they were men or women. You know, a lot of people think of Susanna Hoffs as the Bangles, but the two Peterson sisters and the bass player, whose name is I've lost it here, but anyway, that was a good rock band. The album All Over the Place is a fantastic album. It's got a black and white cover if you're looking for it. You know, that's the album to get of the Bangles. That was one of my favorite albums of the 80s, period, regardless of men or women. That album today still holds up very well, and I still listen to it quite a bit. You know, great harmonies, a lot of twangy guitars, jangly type guitars, good drumming. So the Bangles are my number 5 top female rockers on my list. Or number 4, I'm sorry. I did that last week as well. I got my numbers mixed up. Number 3 on my list is Stevie Nicks. The I guess from about 75 on, she fronted Fleetwood Mac. You know, I don't think she made Fleetwood Mac. That's really when they got their popularity, was when her and Lindsey Buckingham came to Fleetwood Mac. That really is what made them into, you know, from they had quite a bit of success in England back in the late 60s, but they exploded and became one of the highest selling bands of all time in the 70s. And I guess I probably attribute it a lot, maybe a little more, to Lindsey Buckingham and his production style, and he produced a lot of that stuff, and his guitar playing and stuff. But Stevie Nicks, they wouldn't have been who they were without Stevie Nicks. She just, the songs she wrote and sang resonated with people. It seemed to get into their hearts. So my number 2 on my list is from the same band. However, she was with them longer, and she's one of the Macs. She wasn't one of the Macs that they were named after. Her husband was. John McVie was her husband. But number 2 on my list is Christine McVie. I've always liked Christine's voice better. I've always liked Christine's songs better, and I've always liked Christine's musicianship with the keyboards better than Stevie Nicks. I think the way she, I think her vocals are better. I think her harmonization is better. She can do the high or the low. She can't do it anymore. She's pretty elderly. I think she's in her mid-70s right now. I saw them last year in their supposed farewell tour last summer, and she was probably the weak link at that time, but she certainly wasn't throughout the years, especially, after Peter Green left in the early 70s, before they got the McVie and Nicks. I felt like she was writing the strongest songs for those 4 or 5 albums before the Nicks and Buckingham, not McVie, but before the Nicks and Buckingham union. I felt like Christine McVie was probably the strongest musician. She's the strongest songwriter. She had the strongest songs on all those albums. All right, so that brings me down to number 1 on my list, and that is Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders. Gritty, powerful, tons of attitude, great songwriting, absolutely the leader of the band. The Pretenders, there's no doubt about it who the leader is. There's not a lot of those bands where the female just comes out and there's nobody that's going to be leading this band but her, especially back then, early 80s. I think the first album came out in 1980 or something like that, 79 maybe. So those first, I think that the first 4 or 5 albums, the first 2 were fantastic. The first one I still listen to a lot, but she's my favorite, not only my favorite female rocker, but she is probably, if not in my top, probably my top 20 favorite songwriters of all time. I think she's a good songwriter. Lyrically, she makes you think, and musically, just her nearly punk style, really raw and only playing the essential notes, and not a lot of resonation in her notes. I guess maybe they did toward the end of their, she had a few ballads on toward the end there, the late 80s, mid to late 80s. Anyway, she's fantastic. Number 1 on my list. So if you enjoyed this video, please like it, please subscribe, I'd love to hear some conversation about what I'm talking about here, as long as it's polite, as I said. And this is Tony Peterson with Top 5 Rock List signing out.